Hi there and welcome to another video here, an application video for our decorative concrete Venetian plaster fine gray. You can see we're starting to mask off the ceilings. We ran a laser level as well and masked out an area that didn't require any plaster. There's some woodwork, some millworking going in. You can see Kevin here. We had to patch up the walls a little bit. A few spots had some dents and dings and different issues like that. So you always, with the fine, because it doesn't have much aggregate, you want to ensure that your walls are very smooth and free of any kind of defects or anything like that. Here we're just showing kind of the tools. We've got our toolkits with all our different trowels. We've got our roller cages, a scale to measure all our different trowels, plaster, masking guns, 6 inches, festool, all those different types of things. We also have 2 different types of drills, just a regular plaster mixing drill and also a high-speed drill that you would use, like a hammerhead drill. The fine, you want to use the faster drill speed at the end to make sure that you break up all of the marble powder and don't get any streaking from the concrete, gray Portland cement. Here you can see the yellow frog tape. We've masked off about 1.5 mils to 1 mil because it is a thinner coating. Do not leave your tape too far back. You have a choice of tape. We use the yellow frog tape sometimes. There we've got the ultra kind of delicate tape. You can get that at Home Depot, the purple tape that you see there. Here we're applying the quartz primer interior fine with an 80 grit marble powder. We're using a long extension pole here to make things easier. You can see we load up our 13mm Purdy's roller sleeve, with quite a substantial amount of paint. Don't kind of go too dry. When you're applying the quartz primer, make sure that you're rolling it out and not applying too much because it will sag due to the weight of the aggregate. If you just put it on there, it's not going to stay in one place and you'll kind of have a bit of sagging. So you want to make sure that you roll it out nice and thin, getting full coverage, but don't put on too much. Just be, liberal enough, but make sure that you're spreading it out. Here you can see the nice long application, movements that we're using there. Kevin is applying the quartz primer to all of the different internals, anywhere in the ceilings, the floors, baseboards, anywhere where you're not able to reach with the roller. Moving on to the application of the base coat. We're using our ultra flexible trowels here. They're made by Come. We have them on our site here and available. We recommend these for pretty much base coating all the different plasters. They just make things so easy. It's a lot easier to not get lines in the finer plaster. If you try to apply it with a stiff trowel or a drywall trowel, it just makes your life very difficult. This trowel will kind of follow over imperfections in the wall, and you can bend the edges and the corners to try to eliminate your lines, especially the edges of the trowel as well are rounded and curved. You can see here the plaster does have a little bit of movement. It's not super smooth. There will be a few lines and stuff. This is because the aggregate is so fine and there's so much marble powder that there isn't like a set grain height that you can just roll over. So something like our Marmarino has a substantial grain and it kind of sets it off the wall for you. We come back later, as you'll see in the video, and just sand these little ridges and imperfections down before our second coat. Or you can leave them as well and they will show up and create a little bit more of a concrete kind of distressed texture for you. There you can see kind of what we're going for our base coat. It doesn't take too long to put the product on. Another tip as well is do not mix it too thick. The thicker the plaster, the more lines you'll get and the harder it is actually to apply. If you mix it thinner, you'll find that it spreads much more easily and it will break down and kind of, suction onto the wall without creating a thick layer. You always want to, remix the plaster as well as it starts to set up. On your base coat, you can add more water. On your top coat, never add more water mid-wall because it will change the color of the product and lighten it up the more that you hydrate that cement. You can see as well we're working off a professional scaffold here. We're not working off ladders or anything. It makes plastering very difficult if you're trying to work off a ladder. Always rent scaffold or have the builder provide it, or buy your own and invest in scaffolding as well. On those outside edges there's actually a piece of tape on the other side of that corner bead, and we always tape those just to make sure that we don't get plaster on the other painted wall. You can see everything else here is taped up. The windows are all protected as well. The ceiling and around the window frames are all masked nicely. We always edge the internals first with a 6-inch just to make things a little bit easier. We also edge out our ceilings as well with the 6-inch. This stops you from, with your hand, hitting the ceiling and also wrestling with the edge of the trowel and your hand kind of hitting the side wall as you're trying to use the trowel instead of a 6-inch. This is a nice shot that we took here showing the full kind of action that you see with 3 people working on a wall. We edged it all out. We applied everything. 1 person, if they can fit down at the lower section, can work on the bottom. 2 people can work on the top together as well, and it comes together very quickly. When you're working together, if 1 person's left-handed and 1 person's right-handed, you can always start on different sides and work together. If it's a very large wall, you want to work side by side and make sure that you're bringing your dry line wet kind of across the wall rather than having 2 dry lines coming together as you're slowly working in towards each other. There you can see the finished kind of walls. They're not, there's not big, lines and big textures or anything like that. They look quite nice. They look, very much like concrete. This is the second coat now, and you'll see some of the application later, but this is the burnishing. We're using some Pavon inox trowels there, very expensive trowels, but these ones will leave a little bit of gray. We chose not to use our, we have a different trowel from Come, the Bianca trowels, and they don't leave any gray marks, although they're made of steel. When you're doing concrete looks, sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of the carbon come out from the steel and produce a little bit of darkening, so you can see all those little lines and shadow marks from the sand will actually pick up a little bit of darkness from the steel of the trowel and create a nice aesthetic for you. You can use a plastic trowel as well, and this will eliminate any of those issues. Plastic does not darken your plaster. You can also choose to use a Bianca trowel from Come, which also works really well to compress the plaster and get a nice shine from the steel, but without creating any dark marks. You see this kind of half moon crescent movement that we're making from the elbow. This is how you burnish the plaster. You also have the trowel at about a 45-degree angle. Sometimes you're coming across the face of the trowel as you see there. Sometimes we have the trowel kind of moving in a 45 direction, but that is the general kind of movement you can see of the burnishing, how the elbow is kind of coming in a half moon shape. Now we're starting to see some of the application of the second coat. This is more of a Venetian plaster style application for the fine rather than some of the other styles that you'll see with the other products. This, you don't want to put it on in large movements. You don't want to apply too much of it. It's going to dry quite quickly. You do want to put it on and take it off, similar to how you'd see in a traditional Venetian plaster for a high polished plaster. Here's a few photos just showing it, how it's starting to dry. You'll see this cloudiness of dry lines, these lines are not straight, but they're the kind of clouds where we're working and we'll apply a section. That edge will kind of dry a little bit, then we'll apply over that edge, and so you get these beautiful little clouds that connect together. Never work in straight lines because then it's very obvious that you have these straight dry lines everywhere. You always want to move in circular motions, keep your dry lines circular as well, and without any patterns. See these parts here, you can see how it's kind of overlapping in certain sections, but they look very natural rather than just straight lines. You also see the nice pores that you get from the sand and the beautiful kind of color that you get from burnishing the concrete look fine. The concrete look fine comes out quite smooth with a medium shine from the side. It's not going to get extremely shiny like our Gracella series or anything like that, but it does feel very soft and smooth to the touch, and does have quite a nice satin shine from the side if you have a wall that's opening up to a window that you can look down. When you look at it front on, it's going to be quite matte with a lot of modeling and more of kind of a matte surface. But as you get up close to it, you'll see that it actually is quite polished and has a nice sheen to it. We burnished these walls multiple times, so you can see Raman up there on the scaffold. He's now coming back as that's about 70% dry, and he will do a final burnish on that wall. We might do one or sometimes even 2 extra burnishes. So the system is you put the plaster on, then you burnish it as you're going. Usually a second person will burnish behind the applicator. Once you've completed another wall, as that wall is drying, he'll come back and again burnish it, and sometimes burnish it even 3 times until you're happy with the aesthetic and the level of shine. If it's getting too dark, you can just consider moving towards a plastic trowel or the Bianca trowel for your final burnishing. Here's me beginning to demonstrate just the edging technique using the 6-inch. I personally like to edge out as much as I can to start, because once I get the trowel in my hand, I'm able to move quite quickly and apply the plaster. So I don't want to be switching between my 6-inch and my trowel. I will edge out as much as I can reach for that section and then begin applying the plaster with the trowel. I also apply with both my left and right hand. It just makes things easier, but most people will just be using one hand for this particular circumstance. And usually if I'm left-handed, you'll then kind of switch and move your hand across your body and kind of use the other side of the trowel on a backhanded motion. This is more efficient to switch hands for me. It's just much easier. This is that technique that I was describing. So you put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off, and you're making these little half moon motions. Put it on, take it off. So you're not putting a lot of plaster and leaving big lines and big ridges. The amount that I'm putting on my trowel there is quite minimal, probably just like 4 or 5 tablespoons, maybe at a maximum. I'm applying it with a medium stiff trowel here, similar on our website to the Katana trowel I believe I'm using. And you can apply it with a small burnishing trowel if you want even more movement and modeling, but when you're dealing with large surfaces, sometimes it makes more sense to apply with the medium trowel. And then you can decide to do a quick burnish with the medium and then move to the small burnishing trowels for your final burnish, depending on what you're doing. Again, here you see you put it on the 6-inch, put it there, and then spread it out across that tape. You spread it all the way along, focusing on the pressure on the inside edge of the 6-inch there. Again, I like to edge all of that out first, again, before I pick it up, and continue on with the trowel. And you see this dry line that I've left over there. You see how random it is. It's not straight, it's not boxy. And when we connect to that, it's going to look very cloudy rather than something that is clearly visible to the eye and very straight and kind of obnoxious looking. Again, here you're putting it on, taking it off. I like to go over my sections as well personally a little bit, even before. So here we haven't had anyone burnish this wall yet. I've done a lot of it, it's still quite wet. Once I get out of that area, then the person is going to come in and begin burnishing behind me. It can take a bit of time to perfect this technique. It doesn't have to look exactly how I'm doing it. When you're going for those externals, I like to go out from them. So rather than coming over them, I kind of gently go out over top of them. Then you can gently come back the other way there and then clean the edges you see with the head of the trowel. If you put too much pressure going over that edge, you will break it on the external. So you want to be quite gentle there. You can put more pressure as it starts to set up, but never kind of put too much pressure going straight over that external. You will kind of break that edge. Here you can see how we always edge around very carefully around any little tight areas like that. A trowel is not a good tool to use in those tight areas. Here's some nice shots showing the plaster drying and how it kind of sets up. That's already been burnished once. We will come back to that wall again and burnish another time, if not 2 times, it depends. This one was over the doors, and I do believe that it was drying more quickly, so we really only needed to burnish it once in that particular case. You can see the difference in the color from the finished wall. The plaster always dries considerably lighter than when it's wet. Paint usually goes the opposite direction and dries darker, but our plasters always look much darker when you put them on, and then they lighten up a lot. Here you can see Kevin with that burnishing trowel again, just going over the walls. Even though they're dry, we're going over them again. I believe this is the next day. The walls are all perfectly dry. And we decided to give them one final burnish just to put a little bit more color into them, compact them, add a little bit more of the blackness before we applied our penetrating sealer, the advanced penetrating sealer. We're not putting a whole lot of effort into the burnishing here, just slowly going over everything, making sure that shine's coming. You'll get this really nice crystalline shine where the surface starts to really come together and create a nice luster on the second day when it's fully hardened. You'll be able to get a lot of sparkle if you go over it that second day when it's fully cured out. Again, with those nice little half moon movements, you're probably at about a 30-degree angle, maybe 40-degree angle on the trowel. You're not aggressively scraping it, you're quite closed on the face. Going up and down that external, again, not going over top of it to try to break that edge. You can see the tape, as I was saying before, protecting that painted surface on the other side. You can see too, you're not getting any harsh dry lines or anything if you use that technique and the cloudiness. So here we're applying the advanced penetrating sealer. This particular one does not tend to create any picture framing issues, so we do go ahead and brush out some of the edges with this particular one. You have to be careful and usually roll, pushing the sealer up rather than pressing down on the roller as you would coming down, because you'll just squeeze all of the liquid out and it'll just run down your wall and onto the floor. So you want to load it up and then slowly press that roller, pushing the sealer upwards and rolling it out, and then catching any drips after. Because the fine is such a sealed surface, it's not very porous, so it is more difficult to seal. But it's well worth it because it gives a lot more stain protection. It also does seal the surface, and you'll see later it allows us to use a wool head on a Makita cut polisher, and we actually hand buff and mechanically buff these walls and bring out a lot more shine and color with them as well. And that's only possible using the sealer, The other option would be using a wax, but that would create a much shinier look. This gives you a really natural polished concrete look, using the sealer to kind of close those pores off before we start to shine it up. It will look unusual. Some parts darken more than others when you're putting the sealer on, but don't worry, it will dry back to its kind of original look. This sealer doesn't change the color much at all. It does enhance it to some extent. I always find it takes a little bit of the green out of the cement and just grays it up more, but it doesn't really change the color. If anything, it makes it nicer and just a little bit more of a concrete gray compared to a little bit of a green undertone. Here we're up high on the scaffold, just working slowly and carefully. We also remove the tape as we go and as those walls are wet, because the penetrating sealer will wet that edge of the tape and make it much easier to remove the plaster. I do formulate the plasters to be quite strong and very durable, so even with a thin coating like that, it will be difficult to remove the tape. Here, Ramen is using a microfiber rag, and we actually rag over the walls after applying the sealer before it's dry to catch all of the little drips and runs and any excess that's sitting on top of the surface. You'll find sometimes that there'll even be a little bit of a white haze that sits on the surface of any of the reactive particles that haven't absorbed into the cement. There you see how much shine you're getting all of a sudden after the sealer is put on there, and you just give it a little bit of a rag down. You can see you want to protect your floor. The sealer is quite messy because it doesn't have any viscosity. It does like to run out of the roller sleeve. We're using a Purdy's 13 mil microfiber sleeve here as well. Very careful to not put too much pressure on it, because you don't want to squeeze the liquid out. You just want to kind of let it absorb into the wall as you slowly roll up and down. You can see there, see if you roll too quickly, you get that, that line of product coming out the sides that's trying to run all the way down your wall. So you're just going to kind of go down and catch that and re-roll over it. The sealing does take time, and a lot of people do not seal their plasters, but it's well worth it. It makes them a lot harder and more durable and creates a much more beautiful aesthetic, in my opinion. So this is our Makita cut polisher with a wool bonnet. Do not use any other type of foam head. You can see how much more luster this is giving the plaster. We probably use it on about a level 4 out of 6, I think. They're a little hard to control here when you're up on scaffold and you're getting unusual angles, but you can really see from this how it's bringing, you see how it's just bringing that shine out. It's literally like just polishing concrete on your walls, and because of the way it's formulated, it can take that intense kind of heat and polish as well, and it's not going to damage your plaster or come off the wall. We also use the high binding quartz primer, and that really ensures as well that it can take that extra polish rather than just using some acrylic paint to try to bind it to the wall for you. There you're seeing the beautiful aesthetic, the nice little lights and darks, the shine that's coming as well. I highly recommend investing in one of these cut polishers. They are expensive, but if you're going to be doing even a few large projects and you want to polish the walls, they're really a good investment, and there's no substitute for the amount of polishing that these can do for you compared to just trying to do it by hand. There's some of the final shine that you're seeing. It wasn't exactly the best lighting in this place here, but I tried to get some angles to kind of show you what was happening here. These are the finished walls now, a few shots that I was able to get. See the beautiful cloudiness, you've got different colors coming out. Nice shine from the side when you look down it. And when it's all finished, this project will look absolutely beautiful when they put all the trim and the millwork and everything in there. So yeah, so that's the concrete find. I hope this application video helped.